Okay, this should now work. I'm gonna go to it, make sure. Okay, yes. No. Okay, yeah, it's working, which is good.
Okay.
So I might just close these for a second, just give it like a few minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. We're finally
Okay.
back. All right. Thank you, everyone, for sticking with us. Appreciate it. And welcome finally to the first episode of Creators on Brand.
And
A
like
little bit
many
of a rough start.
it wasn't perfectly smooth. But
No, it wasn't that smooth. I didn't know I had one shot to go live, but it's okay. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining in. So kind of just to start off, my name is Rami. I'm the founder and brand strategist at Tembe Studios, and I'm joined by Judy Bigham today. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hi. Yep, Judy Bigham, and I own JB Web Studio, do website design, WordPress websites, and I'm so happy to finally be here.
Awesome. And yeah, so the whole point of this series is to really demystify what it means to grow a brand. So, normally speaking, a lot of people see a brand as a logo or some colors, but it's a lot more than that. And I want to start this series where I'm talking to different creators on LinkedIn who are in the branding space and with different backgrounds. So yeah, today, like I said, I'm joined by Judy. Um, and the topic for today is building the hub of your brand, which is your website. Um, so in terms of what a brand is, the whole thing behind Tempe Studios is that we're leading the new age of branding, which is the whole idea that, like I said, like the brand is not a logo or just some colors. It's more than that. It's your culture. It's how you present yourself in the market, and it's how you shape your perception in the market. So Judy, why would you say that your website is the hub of your brand?
Well, your website is where all the brand elements, your visuals, your imagery, everything that creates, provides the image, the feeling that people get when they think of your brand. Website's where it can all come together, be recognizable. It's where you can speak to your clients and customers. And it's also a foundation for all your marketing efforts. And as your business grows, it's more and more functionality can be added to it and automate a lot of those marketing activities.
Right. And I know we're going to talk about a little bit later, but I forgot to mention, it's like, what kind of people do you work with and things like that? Because we're going to talk about kind of
Yeah,
how that applies.
yeah. So I work with I like to work with solopreneurs and small business owners, and a lot of times, these are people who are trying to build a business or sustain a business that they're passionate about. They're bringing themselves into it. They have themselves, they've invested their own, time and creativity into it. So I love working with people like that because it's where I feel like it's the most meaningful once we build a website, to be able for that business owner to share like a part of themselves with the world.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of very similar between us. We were talking about earlier, because I like to work with people who are very like people-focused brands, is what I like to say. So I feel like we have that similar value there. But you work with more like service solopreneurs and things like that, and I'm a little bit more on the product side, so SaaS businesses, things like that, doing brand strategy. So I thought it'd be cool to kind of talk about how those things overlap. Judy actually helped me out with my own website like maybe a month or two ago on the Tempe Studios one. Uh, Before that point, I was like, I thought it was great. I thought I was doing good, but I realized I was only looking at it through my own lens. Um, and Judy came and really gave me a fresh set of eyes and gave it to me straight, which is great. So yeah, today I just want to pretty much break down that conversation that we had in more general terms, to kind of show people what it means to build a solid website and to build the hub of your brand. So yeah, so kind of just to start off, in terms of like layouts and things like that we were talking about during our meeting, we were talking a lot about like above the fold type of things. So when it comes to like a service business, what kind of stuff are you thinking about putting up there?
Well, I think, there's the basics around, your headline and your tagline. So the important thing is grabbing people's attention, and we all have our short attention spans. So when people come to your website, it's really your opportunity to welcome them, to, talk to them, to show them a part of what you offer and what benefits you can and results you can bring them. So um, above the fold, whether it's imagery, words, both, a picture of you. These are things that are going to, engage and hope speak to your ideal clients. So that's the first thing is above the fold, just to grab their attention, honestly. But basically, you're going to want to convey, who you are, who you serve, and what you can do for them. And then from there, the people your audience should be wanting to scroll further and learn more about you.
Yeah, because I know we were talking back and forth about like even on Tenby's thing, I was super unclear as to like what my goal is, because you asked me like, what's your goal with your website? And I remember sitting there for a second. I was like, well, to get clients. But I mean, at the end of the day, like there has to be a more specific goal, and we kind of broke it down into kind of bringing awareness to this whole new age of branding piece. And you helped me put these elements above the fold, which was super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, are there different goals when creating a website, and like how do those goals affect kind of your design process?
Yeah, I think so. The goals, I think the two primary things that affect or that vary with the people I talk to looking to either create or redesign their website are where they are in their business. Are you just starting out? And I think this applies to probably branding and any other creative service for business owners. Is where are you in your business? What's your marketing strategy? Are you trying to build brand awareness? Are you trying to grow your email list? So already you're gonna have different goals to guide the visitor through your website, right? To arrive at whatever that call to action might be, to whether it's learn about you, point them to certain resources, or sign up for a newsletter. So there's that whole range of things that your website can do for you. So, and then the other side of it, your marketing strategy. I am surprised how many people I talk to, like us, starting our own businesses, trying to grow it, don't really know how they're going to direct traffic to the website. I mean, I thought this myself up at the beginning too, when I first started. But I honestly wasted probably, more time than I should have.
Yeah, I was in the same boat. And yeah, and we were talking about that too. It's like I do like brand strategy and things like that for all these, SaaS companies and things like that. But it was super ironic that for the first 8 months of me trying to build traction, I wasn't applying my own brand strategy to myself. So you're absolutely right. I mean, having that strategy beforehand makes it much, much easier to go in and actually apply it.
Yeah.
So I mean, like when a company comes to you, do you generally do like content first? Is that part of your process where it's like
Definitely.
Okay, so like when you get that content, what does that process look like for you?
Yeah, so I kind of simplify the project process into 4 steps. So there's the project kickoff, all the project planning, project management part of it, setting dates, all that type of thing, so we can stay on schedule. And then the second phase is content gathering. And depending on the client, they might have already worked with someone like you, like makes my job a lot easier, because honestly, that's a matter of like, okay, hand it off. I'll take a look at what it is, because there can be varying levels of that, the quality of it, right? And I'll be honest and basically make sure that these are pieces of a puzzle to me. So I want to make sure the pieces will fit together in the end for the vision that we have for the client site. So it can be as like straightforward as that, or sometimes clients who are doing a lot themselves might need help along the way. So I might have a couple check-ins. What I like to do for someone who comes to me and needs a website redesign, or they're pivoting or something and they don't have these brand assets, is to call up Rami and say, basically point them in the direction of expertise that might fit where they are in their business.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big piece too. I mean, like when we talk about like the whole strategy aspect, because for me, I don't know if I know a lot of brand strategists do things differently. I like to keep things very interactive, especially in the beginning. I do like interactive workshops, like 2-day workshop with different stakeholders. And the website is always one of the first things that comes up. And I always try to push that to the second day, because people always want to talk about this on the site. And I'm like, okay, let's figure out who we are as a brand first. Let's figure out what we're trying to show, and who we're trying to speak to. So once you have that audience and everything like that, then making the content and putting on the site does become a lot easier, which is great.
So let me ask you, because a lot of my audience or people I like to help are, one-person shops, probably earlier on in their business, versus maybe SaaS companies who might have funding, a bigger budget, right, that you kind of center around. So how would that process working with you differ, or I guess what would the process look like, your typical process, and then how might that differ if you worked with a solopreneur or someone who has been in business a couple of years? And
Yeah, so I think in terms of like a SaaS company compared to a solopreneur, I mean, there's some differences, but I think really it's just about simplifying it. Because if you're a solopreneur, let's say for example you're looking to grow your personal brand over growing a company's brand. So as a company brand, you're using a lot of things like we, and you're talking about a team, and you're trying to build a personality. Whereas as a solopreneur, your brand personality is you. So I feel like the difference here is really just focusing on strategy. It's less about, okay, let's get this huge design system set up. Let's get all these different touch points set up, but focus on one touch point as a solopreneur. So let's say LinkedIn, for example, and really double down on that strategy piece and make sure that you're planning out an effective roadmap to actually grow on this one platform. So speak to customers, really get to know people, get to know other people in your network, kind of like what we're doing right now. And essentially over time grow on that platform and then move off. Whereas if you're a brand, you're kind of looking to develop a hub and then have a bunch of touch points that take you to that hub. So I see it as a solopreneur, really simplify, focus on strategy, and focus on one thing. Whereas as a brand, you really want to diversify and be everywhere.
Okay, so it's kind of like, it's almost like an opposite or different directions, that how the way you form the core of this. I mean, it all starts with core values, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the same. That's the commonality.
Right. No, absolutely. And especially kind of like the core piece of what a brand is the commonality. So like, what's your mission, your vision, your values? What's your purpose? What are your driving cause? Who's your audience? Those pieces of a brand strategy stay the same with everything. But I think in terms of implementation is where it differs. Because when you're by yourself, I mean, look at someone like Justin Welsh, for example. He's one of the biggest guys ever on LinkedIn, and he's a solopreneur. But he didn't, and he's also on Twitter, and he's on podcasts, and he's on everything. But he didn't start off by doing all of these different platforms. He started off on Twitter, and then grew that, and then moved off of it, because he knew where his target audience was hanging out. Whereas as a brand, as a company, you want to be a little bit more diverse with it.
To expand your reach sooner than later.
Right.
Whereas as a solopreneur, we don't know who our audience is. So it's definitely a little tricky from my standpoint when working with the brand.
And I think that comes down to interviews too. I mean, interview the people you've worked with before and like figure out what motivated them to buy from you, what made them trust you, just what made them pull out their wallet and give you their credit card information. If you can start to figure out those motivators and then the pain points that you solve for them, you can develop messaging, you can develop branding that really speaks to those people and attracts them to you. But it does start with speaking to your customers and also having a very clear core stance as to who you are and what you stand for. And then you bridge that gap between the two.
Okay. Yeah. So filling in the gap is so ways that you help fill that gap are workshops, questionnaires. Yeah. How does that look like?
So what I was saying before is kind of like how you have to know who you are as a brand and who your customers are. So those two things are split into two phases for us. So figuring out who you are as a brand is that workshop piece. So it's very much focused on, like I was saying before, like your mission, vision, that core piece. And then also looking at who your target audience is, developing personas, archetypes, and then it's very SaaS focused for the one we do. So it's pricing structures that fit that audience. So that's essentially figuring out who you are as a brand, what you stand for. And then figuring out who your customers are is that interview stage where we go through and interview 5 to 10 of your customers, scale those insights with surveys, and then develop messaging frameworks and design systems that essentially bridge the gap between those two things. And when
you say design systems, that sounds.
Oh yeah. So yeah, for a design system, what I mean by that is essentially you get full logo kit, and then all like your patterns, your colors, different icons, marketing collateral. So essentially, whenever you go on somewhere, you don't have to go, call up a graphic designer to go make you something. You have all your core elements there. And then messaging framework is essentially your pillar system. So let's say from a solopreneur's perspective, it's like your content pillars. So what are the 3 things that you talk about on LinkedIn? And then those are essentially your 3 top pieces. And then what are your subtopics underneath those?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we help you develop on a bit of a larger scale. And that helps bridge the gap between who you are and who your customers are.
Yeah, I am just like, these questions that come to mind are like, how do I do that? How do I know? Okay, I'm just going to say but just because it's a lot of people in my situation. How do I know when it's good time to invest? Like, put that investment aside to spend on some working with someone like you.
That's a good question. I think there's a few things you can look at in your business overall. First one is messaging. So if your message isn't cutting through the noise, very similar to what you were saying with your website. If it's not cutting through the noise and people aren't paying attention to what you're saying, that's usually not the best sign. The next thing is positioning. So if you struggle to identify what makes you unique in the market, then there's a problem there. You can also look at things like tactics. So for example, if you're active on social media, which now everybody should be, your tactics are your tactics telling a consistent story? Like, are the platforms that you're on, do they make sense for your target customers and things like that? Are they working? If your marketing is attracting the wrong leads, you definitely need branding help. And then in terms of awareness too. So if you ask your previous clients, or if you ask team members what makes your product so good, if they can't answer that question, then it might be time to go through a brand strategy process. But those are the main things I would say that I would look for.
Okay, I wanted to see if there was any questions but go ahead.
Sorry, this whole thing just shut down for a second. 1 sec, I lost this stream. Okay, I'm good. All right. Yeah, so something else that just kind of going back to that website piece. We talked a little bit about layouts when we were talking about my site. We also talked about copy a little bit and kind of like the design aspect of things. I mean, are there any just general tips that you'd give about like just keeping things concise? Because I know for me originally it was very complex. So.
And it always is when we're doing our own thing, right? It's a lot more complex. So it's always good, even if it's a friend or a LinkedIn acquaintance, to kind of have someone look it over for you just from that, outside, somewhat objective standpoint. And so to answer your question, to remind me the question again.
Oh yeah. So would you give like any tips to people who are looking to just make their copy and their design of the site a lot more concise and simple?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the ideal project is when someone comes to me and they have copy and they have the website copy, they have the brand elements, the design system, and it makes my job very, very, very enjoyable, easy, because that's just the core of what I like, the part of the project I love the most. But there's resources out there to help with copywriting that I usually provide my clients, like a few different ways that they could look into and try. But it's really important to kind of take your time with it. And what I found is, you could go through a questionnaire or something, but you kind of have to go through it, get everything out, let it sit, kind of take another pass, like pick out the commonalities across, your responses, whatever, and really, from a messaging standpoint, boil it down, kind of like in the same way you probably do with the branding strategy overall. Like, what are your brand words? What are your and just having the repeating it just throughout
And
the
that's
message.
something you brought up to me too. I forget what I had said. I think it was the new age of branding. I think initially I had put that like one time on the entire site, and you went through and you were like, where is it again? What is it? So it was very unclear originally. So you're absolutely right there.
Yeah, the new age of branding. I mean, that just sounds awesome. Like I'm like waiting to read about it, and it is something that you someone who's going to your site and you have that up top, they expect to kind of have that supported throughout the site. That's one of your main things. So, and the other thing was, okay, so for those of you who do or even enjoy doing your own website or pulling, images together for it, the consistency it is really important. So is it okay if I mention, you had this really cool, hero image, like the first.
Circles. Oh my God, the circles are so bad.
No, they were really good. They were really cool. But then I went to your about page, and then the headers on those were I'm like, oh, this is Rami's,
that was like the thing.
Your bear and your coloring and everything, and so that was the first thing. It's as cool as the homepage hero image was, it didn't go with the rest of the
site. Not at all. Yeah, it didn't.
That was the first thing.
I was so stuck on it too for the longest time. I needed somebody else to come in and tell me no.
Yeah. And we all do. So I think, the thing about helping you and the handful of other people I helped with that initiative was, we literally spent like 10 or 15 minutes on a call, right? Looking at your website together. And everything could have been spot on. Yeah, it's close. But it's all about giving you confidence, I think, to validate that you were spot on is what I think a lot of small business owners and people who are doing it themselves and trying to make it work themselves really need. So yeah, take advantage of that offer or the friend or another, I like to say, the designer's eye, to just make sure it feels cohesive and flows.
You're asking me, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
but you're asking me some good questions too that I hadn't really considered. I mean, you were going through the whole site. We brought up the design aspects, and then you started bringing up, what does your email funnel look like? Like, how are you getting people through, to sign up for things and things like that? And I was like, well, honestly, I just have a CTA up and that's it. But there's clearly a little bit more to it, if you don't mind explaining.
Well, yeah, I think you had the basics. So there's like the core pieces, right? The what you're offering in exchange for the visitor's email address, whether it be a lead magnet or something. You have to offer them something. And then, actually collecting the email and then integrating it on the back end to your email service provider. Like, it's not like you have to manually put it into an Excel spreadsheet these days, right? And then the third part is delivering it. Like, are you going to deliver it by email? Are you going to deliver the lead magnet? Like, is it going to be an instant download? And then with that, thank you. So those are the key pieces, but then you can layer on, and this doesn't actually have to be on your website, right? It can be in a landing page, or there's actually other tools out there to support this, but you can layer on addition to every one of those steps. They're touch points, right? So you can layer on, there's these opportunities to maybe when you do direct them to a thank you page, there's just like, okay, thank you, blah, blah, blah. I just have a few quick questions, 1, 2, or 3 questions. Like, how'd you hear about me? So you can use the opportunity to collect data about your leads. And you have to remember the opt-in, like legal stuff. That's kind of
which you reminded me about. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's not really, that's a whole nother topic. But
Yeah.
um yeah, and it's not that complicated. I talked to someone the other day about it, and she was kind of, I feel like it was holding her back to
Yeah.
have to deal with all that. And I was just like, it's really pretty simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so don't let that hold you back.
Yeah. And I found a tool the other day. It's called Snovio, and like it lets you pretty much capture all these emails and then set up like drip campaigns and things like that, um, which was like which is really cool. I set it up all yesterday, which is nice.
Yeah, so that's the other thing is you can collect all these emails, but I had a client once who we put an email opt-in on her site, and she didn't even like she hadn't even thought about like what she would put in, actually emailing these
Yeah.
people. So you kind of have to make a commitment up front as to what, again, like you're doing something for a certain purpose,
Right.
and knowing like a few steps ahead of what that purpose is, um, is important. So there was a question about the name that you had of
The tool is
the
called it's called Snovio. It's Snovio. I literally just found out about it, so my review's probably not the best, but so far I think it's going to be really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, these things can now, because of products like that, probably can live outside your website,
Oh,
or
absolutely. Yeah.
you could just have something as simple as a landing page. And I'm not trying to talk people out of, building a website, but doesn't always make sense to
And my question too, like
spend
this,
time on that.
like, have you ever built landing pages? Like, is that your thing, or is that something that you do, or not?
Um, you know what? To me, it's the same kind of process and tools that to build a landing page. What's different is, the copy really that goes into it, and the strategy, the copy strategy.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah.
Yeah, because I know we were talking about before, because like a landing page is essentially like a quick sale. Um, Actually, I don't know if I might have been talking about this with somebody else, but I was talking about this idea where a landing page is a essentially like your quick sale. It's like your buy with emotion, and then your website is like your buy with logic. So it's like your website is made to move people through your sales funnel, and your landing page is made to get people to purchase or give you their email immediately.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think so. Landing page is what did you call it?
I saw somewhere it was like your landing page is you buy off emotion is based off emotion, and then your website
Mhm.
is based off of logic.
Right. So the main difference is, so I'll just kind of fill in some of the background on it is, landing page, you don't have a menu. You don't have options. The design is really start up the top and just literally funnel them down the page. Um, have the call to action, and then more reinforcement and call to action, and it honestly is very repetitive. I think
Yeah,
it's hard because for me, when I first was looking at that as a service based business, it kind of got, it was like, I think it looks different if you're a
yeah, I
product
get that.
or
Yeah,
service.
and that's something
Um,
I've seen the same thing. I've worked with service businesses before, and it does take a second to kind of switch out of that product mentality where it's like,
yeah,
yeah, like everything is not a revolution. So it's like, especially with like service businesses and things like that. So getting out of that mindset was different. But yeah,
yeah, and it took me a while to kind of recognize the difference. So, um, the other thing I wanted to say, oh yeah, so the landing page is really not going to give you many options to go, navigate through like your website would be.
yeah,
So yeah, it's kind of like boom.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
You're ready to buy now, versus the website is where visitors will come because they want to learn about you,
yeah,
right? Whether they heard about you from a friend or found you online. That's why I think it's really important to have the strategy behind it, and everything's intentional. Should be intentional on there.
And yeah, speaking of that, like, is there anything that being intentional, like, is there any information that can be given to you upfront that would make doing that easier when you're working with somebody?
Definitely, like I mentioned, having, let's say you've already have your website copy, whether you work through it yourself or engaged a copywriter, and then same with the brand asset stuff. But it's really, I think it's knowing, it's being able to talk about and understand, where you want your in a year, in 6 months or a year, and how your website can help you get there. And the potential client doesn't need to come knowing that. That's what I would like to talk through with them.
Right.
But only I can't guess where they want to be. And that's kind of the beauty of working with, small business owners, is every business there is different, right? It's really dependent on the person.
Absolutely.
So that's the fun part for me.
Oh, that's awesome. And then also, this is kind of like a philosophical question that just came up. But what do you think? Do you think websites are going to change, like, the whole way that, like, where am I trying to go with this? This is some question I saw on LinkedIn the other day. It was similar to, do you think that websites are either going to become obsolete within 10 years, or they're going to be the only thing essentially within 10 years?
That's a good question. You didn't give me a heads up on this one.
I didn't. I just came on.
No, yeah, I don't really have an immediate answer. I feel like the definition of a website in 10 years will just mean something. I feel like the meaning of it, the definition will change.
Yeah. Because I've seen, it's like, not to, I personally believe that a website is like your go-to place. Like, the whole title of this is the hub of your brand, which I genuinely believe it is. But I've also seen some companies, when I was doing competitive research recently for another client, and I saw 2 companies use a Notion page as their website, which was like super, super interesting. And like, I've never seen anybody do that. Do you think that's a profession that could come up, where people are now making like Notion sites and things like that?
Yeah, but it's still a website, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
It's a different tool. And I have thought about, and this is one of my shiny object and syndrome things. It's like, oh, Notion, and like, oh my God, you could build, web pages on there. How cool. But yeah, I don't know how long. I definitely agree that that's a good way to go. If that fits your skill set, there's really so many options. But in the end, I still think it's the website.
Yeah, I do agree personally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess just kind of like, just to wrap it up in a sense, but like, what does the process from start to end look like for you? So when a client, what's your ideal process? A dream client just came to you. What does it look like?
My dream okay. So I would love to be involved from the start, meaning they need help, an expert for their brand strategy. They need they're ready to invest in, like, have an expert do their website copy. And I like being involved from that perspective, because my project manager days, I love, like, I feel like it's like bringing all these pieces together again, like a puzzle thing. And it's pieces being the expertise, right? And bring it together and making it easy for the client, whether they want to work directly with the other experts, or work like maybe with me as more of a central point of contact. So either way, those 2 modes of taking care of that content gathering is ideal. But I like being involved at that point. I can kind of see it from the beginning, and by the time they do deliver the content, I just feel like I have a in-depth background of what they're looking for. So yeah, so the content and then any inspiration they have. They know what they like.
Yeah.
I actually like, my favorite type of clients are like discerning is a word I don't usually use. But someone brought it up and I'm kind of like, yeah, I guess that's a good description. They know what they like. They know what they don't like. They can, they have high expectations, not unreasonable. So, but you know, because I feel like that's just a lot of like me. So, it's really about, you know, the person and kind of the things they value that make a project ideal.
No, I totally agree. That's great. And I also like to be part of, like, what you're saying is kind of like very, very similar to me. I really like when startups come to me and they maybe just started a couple years ago, maybe they just got funding and they've never thought about brand ever and they just don't know what to do. That's like my favorite thing, because the workshop's super interactive. So it's like, you know, seeing people's eyes light up when a new idea comes to mind that they never thought of is super cool. And then, yeah, seeing it go from each stage and handing it off to someone like you to have it, you know, just all be built out visually. It's really cool.
Yeah. You know, so I don't know if can we go past one? I know a lot of we schedule it, but with the whole snafu.
I think we can a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. So, because I wanted to build on that, and but I forgot what it was.
No worries. Okay. Yeah. I mean,
okay. So we talked about the process. We kind of mentioned that.
I don't think we're missing anything out. I think
so. Yeah. So someone said a website's like a puzzle for me too. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a long-term puzzle for me, but I finally got it solved.
So I have a question for you. This is what I was thinking, because, and I kind of mentioned this to you before, but we didn't really take it anywhere. So if the workshops, so you would do a workshop with, let's say, a small company of like stakeholders, right? Like, I don't know, a handful of
yeah,
people.
usually like 2, 3.
Now that would, if you were going to do that with a single person business owner, you know, business or whatever, it probably wouldn't be, like you said, you would be simplified version.
Right. Yeah.
But could you do like a workshop with maybe multiple? Like, let's say I brought along 4 friends who had maybe somewhat similar services.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is totally.
This is cool, because when you brought that up to me, like we got off that call and I was like, oh wait, I could maybe really do something with this, because yeah, the way our workshop now works with bigger brands, it's 2 days and it's a little bit more extensive in talking about like pricing structures and things like that. Things that I feel like most solopreneurs don't care about in the second day. So I would essentially break it down into, I would probably make it very LinkedIn specific, honestly, just because I personally know LinkedIn at this point. And I feel like I would set it up in a sense of, yeah, we're still figuring out what your core brand is. So what's your mission, vision, driving values? Figure out who your audience is, what your persona is. And all this is interactive. So like I pretty much talk to you about, we try to figure out somebody that you worked with a while ago and ask all these questions and things like that and try to really step into their shoes. And then I'd probably go through and develop things like content pillars and messaging frameworks, but on a smaller scale, something that's, you know, built for people that can go and apply it themselves. They don't have to go get a team to go apply.
Right.
So yeah, I feel like overall I would simplify it and go more of like a content focus, kind of like a branding / marketing mix, where it's like, yeah, we see who we are, see who we're serving, but also how are we going to get to them, is probably how I would set that up.
Okay. So I love that, because I think it's smaller scale, smaller, you know, investment level clients or businesses need to kind of combine. They can't like have this, you know, this budget and this budget. They have to kind of try and consolidate, or they're taking care of multiple things at once, right? So I like that focus. Now, but what you talked about is kind of like a working one-on-one-to-one.
Yeah.
Versus,
So one-to-many would just make that, well, like as I was saying it, I was thinking like one-to-many would be kind of like a generalized process of that. So rather than asking you, who is this customer, I would just pretty much go through the process as a workshop. But I feel like if I were to do this, I would much rather a one-on-one. I really like the whole idea of building out somebody's brand personally for them. And yeah, so if I were to ever do something similar to Solopreneur piece, it would probably be more one-on-one workshops, I feel like.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to overwhelm you. Sometimes I get these ideas and I'm like, but I honestly feel like that's a gap that I have not seen much. I don't know.
Hopefully I'll be there soon. I just got to get a few other things figured out and I'll be there.
Okay. So anyway, I was just looking at a note here. Okay.
Other than that, I think that's pretty much everything. If there's any questions in the chat, I mean, feel free to ask.
Yep. So, Rami, who are you going to have on next? Now that we've ironed out all the technical
that was been ironed out, but ideally, wait, sorry, let me just look at this. I don't know if you've covered, but what would be your advice to someone just starting out and trying to figure out this brand thing?
Okay.
Just starting out, I would essentially get rid of the super ambiguous definition that brand currently has, and replace it with brand equals what people think of you in the market. So once you essentially realign yourself on that definition, then understand that in order to control that perception in the market, you have to be consistent on all your different mediums. So wherever you are. So even in email inboxes, when you're emailing people, you should sound the same as you do in your LinkedIn posts or as you do on a podcast or wherever you might be. Everything should stay consistent in terms of messaging. Everything should stay consistent in terms of visuals and who you're talking to. And that's kind of like the starting ground for your brand. But a couple starting questions to ask yourself are, what's my mission? What's my vision? What are my values? So if you ask yourself those three questions, that should give you solid starting ground as to who you are. And then ask yourself, who am I serving? What are their motivators? What are their pain points? That gives you a solid starting ground who you're serving, and then take it from there with all the different brand touch points. But that's kind of how I'd give a quick breakdown as to how to think about it.
Great question, Valicia. I know Valicia, and this is a great question. Yeah, you know what what you just described that I've seen missing is the control part, right? So the coming up with your values and that what you stand for, what the images you want people to have of you is one thing, but doing the other things, activities where you're controlling that is where I think I don't know if that's part of the new age part, but that's something that I've kind of have seen missing. I like how you address that.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like especially now, especially like solopreneurs, people just starting, you don't need to do anything crazy. You don't need to be on a million platforms. Just be consistent somewhere, and it will start to compound for you, and then take it from there.
Right. Yeah. So another mistake I see people making when they're on their own is if they don't see results right away, they kind of abandon one thing and maybe think of something else that either they can offer or start anew.
I did the same thing. Honestly, I give myself like 3 months now per idea. So if I have an idea and I think to myself, I really, really want to do this, and I have this tendency to really, really want to do a lot of things. So it's like, if I have that idea, I say, okay, I'll spend this week setting it up, doing any upfront work that has to happen. And I give myself 3 months. If it doesn't work in 3 months, I cut it off and it's done. And honestly, ever since I started doing that, things have been growing a lot faster. I don't get stuck up on old ideas. So it's been nice.
Yeah. Oh, so we were going to talk about who you're having on next. Do you have an?
Oh yeah. So I actually don't know 100% next, but I was talking to a little bit to Vin Ezzy, a little bit to Yuval too. And so hopefully one of them will be next within the next 2 weeks. Trying to make this happen on a bi-weekly basis, hopefully.
Nice.
But yeah, still have to schedule that, but we talked, which is nice, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah, and we worked out, like I said, we ironed out the technical difficulties.
Yeah, I appreciate you with your patience. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Keep it consistent in all platforms is great advice. Yes.
Yes.
Just because there's different audiences on different platforms, there's still some level of consistency that you need to have. And that's why I am not on Twitter and
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
TikTok.
One day maybe, but yeah, LinkedIn I found it, like I tried Instagram for the longest time and it just wasn't for me either. I also realized I can't continue to make graphics every day, so it's like I wanted something where I could just write, and LinkedIn is perfect.
Yep. So yeah. What else? Did you have any other questions for me? Okay.
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, other than that, that's pretty much everything I had.
Okay.
But thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you doing this and dealing with the technical difficulties that we went through.
Yeah. For anyone who's still listening, I have to tell you, like, so Rami and I met, just take this extra minute.
Yeah.
So Rami and I met, I don't know how many, I getting back active on LinkedIn in June, end of June.
Yeah.
And so we probably had a Zoom call, whatever, a month after that. And then just, continued and bouncing these ideas off each other. And then this came up, and this is my first live. This is my first video, anything like this. So doing this with someone like Rami has really made it a lot easier. I don't think I would have done it without, partner in crime. So I encourage any of you, and if I can do it, oh my God, anybody can do it. Honestly.
No, but honestly, that goes both ways, 100%. Because I literally sent an email to Judy like yesterday saying how nervous I was, whatever. And it turns out we're in the same boat. And we got on a call, and by the end of the call, we were both fine. So I mean, honestly, it's really been great getting to know you the past few months. And yeah, I really, really appreciate you hopping on here.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. All right.
Good luck on your next one.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.